Hello everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Ángela. I am a teacher and researcher at the University of León, and I'll be presenting an analysis of the novel The Binding by Bridget Collins, which intertwines the themes of memory, identity, and repression through the powerful metaphor of book binding. So the story raises important philosophical and ethical questions which are related to the construction of identity, the mechanisms of repression, and societal control. And the central narrative premise is that books are vessels of individuals' traumatic memories. They contain memories which were too painful to remember. And the act of forgetting in itself is a paradoxical process in the novel because it is at once a form of liberation from social norms and expectations, but also a violation of the self, a loss of identity. So in this study, in this presentation, I use close textual analysis together with psychoanalysis and queer theory, and I combine these with trauma studies. So as I said, psychoanalysis is used to explore the treatment of memory, repression, and identity in the novel, whereas queer theory is used to examine the resistance to and subversion of normative structures of desire, gender, sexuality, and identity. And as I said, I used trauma studies as a bridge that links the mechanisms of repression with the experiences of marginalized identities. And just to give you a very brief summary of the story, The Binding is set in an alternate world where memories can be removed and bound into books, which are later on hidden forever, and stories are forgotten. We follow Emmett Farmer, who is sent to apprentice with Seredith, who is a binder that transforms people's traumas into books, into hidden books. And as Emmett Farmer learns the craft of bookbinding, he realizes there's a book with his own name, and this means that his memory has been erased. And this involves his secret love for the young Lucian Darnay, and this includes his an erasure of his queer identity, but also the psychological trauma of being bound, because this process creates a big trauma for patients. And the novel then follows his struggle to recover his memories, rebuild his identity, and confront the social forces that exploit binding to control and silence people. And here we see other interesting characters like Emmett's father and Emmett's mother, who also have an important role in the story. Along the whole story we see lots of symbols, particularly books, but also plants, horses, mirrors, darkness, and dreams. And we consider binding as the tool to extract traumatic memories and erase them, and this parallels the technique of psychoanalysis itself and the concept of the unconscious, because books and binding are the suppression of identity and the repression of desires, and this means that trauma can be healing but also silencing, especially for Emmett's queer identity. We also have the symbol of the locked room that hides all the binded stories or the bound stories, and we see that these could resemble the hidden unconscious and the hidden desires that are repressed in the unconscious. And repression, as in psychoanalysis, allows temporary peace, but erases part of the self, and at some point memories always come out. And we also see that this concept of trauma and memory and repression and the process of binding fragments all the individual's identity, because books hold silenced memories like the unconscious in the psychoanalytic theory. So we've seen that books are a symbol for repression, for memory, and for identity, but also for social control, because in the binding we have books as a tool to censor stories, and it's a powerful tool, because those in control decide which memories survive and which memories can be read. There's a commodification of trauma. Books in the story of the binding are sold as entertainment, and this is a critique of how society exploits personal pain for consumption. And this is linked to the themes of memory, colonization, and loss of autonomy, and loss of identity and alienation. And this theme of the unconscious and memory repression is very, very important in the story. There's a continuous tension between the conscious part of our minds and the unconscious part, both in the story itself, but also in the narrative style, because we have continuous flashbacks that tell us what the characters remember and what they don't. And we also see with this theme of the unconscious that there is a loss of free will for Emmett and Lucian, because their identities are fragmented when they are bound, and therefore their emotions are shaped by erased memories that they don't know about, and this shows a loss of agency and free will. We also see that this identity eraser, this removal of traumatic memories, also removes a part of the self, as we've seen. And this, of course, limits the ability of Emmett and Lucian to resist social norms and social expectations, and they, of course, risk the total loss of their individuality. They risk becoming completely alienated. As part of these unconscious, it is very important to have a look at dreams. And in the story, we have dreams as messages. They are the return of the repressed, because Emmett's nightmares contain all his repressed fears, desires, and traumatic experiences regarding his love for another man. And this aligns again with Freudian dream theory about censored wishes. And about this type of dreams and the return of the repressed, we can also highlight an authorial unconscious, because Bridget Collins herself, her experiences, when she was writing the story, she was also volunteering. Before she wrote the story, she was volunteering as for the Samaritans, and she was replying to calls of people who wanted to take their life away. And she was also taking a book binding course. So these two experiences may have shaped the novel, because she somehow turned her desire to help others by volunteering into the novel's central metaphor of taking pain away. And of course, the bookbinding course helped a lot in the descriptions of the story. And in this novel, we also see a continuous negotiation between impulse and obedience, queer impulse and obedience to social norms, and we see that there's a constant battle between desire and repression, impulse and obedience, and this is, of course, a resistance against heteronormativity, and we see that the psychic structure, which was divided into ego, superego, and id for Freud, or consciousness, conscience, and the unconscious, can be embodied by certain characters in the story. For example, ego could be Seredith, who acts as a mediator. The superego could be the protagonist's families, who embody authority. And the id could be Emmett and Lucian, who try to act based on their instincts, and they want to reconcile with their desires. Now, this is one way of seeing it, but we can also identify the ego, the ego, with Emmett's journey towards reconciling personal desire with social expectations. The superego with the social condemnation embodied in the act of binding people. And the id could also be Emmett and Lucian's repressed queer desire and instinctual love. As we said, they are trying to act according to their instincts. And in the story, we see lots of uncanny elements. Freud's theories are still used to understand the psychological horror and fascination that we can also often found in Gothic literature. And this story could actually be considered a part of Gothic, and it intersects with queer theory through repression, alienation, and transgression. And there are lots of uncanny elements that make the story a bit Gothic. We have lots of elements that are frightening or that evoke dread in the reader. And these are, for example, Seredith's country house. We also have an uncanny atmosphere and personified weather. It's winter and there's darkness all throughout the story. There are also frozen lakes which pose danger for the characters. And we have the elements of hidden desires, transgression, and fragmented identities. We have the alienation and the other, and we have insanity, illnesses among the family. We have family secrets and treasons. So it's a very uncanny story. There are lots of uncanny elements. As part of this deconstruction of identity, this loss of identity, we see lots of concepts that are linked to queer theory. And this is, for example, gender performativity, when both characters are forced to perform identities that are socially acceptable but internally fake, and they conform to heteronormative expectations through the suppression of their memories. We also have the being in, being out of the closet binarism, where we have characters that conceal their identity in order to survive, but they are alienated. And we also have the idea of revealing their desire to reveal themselves as they are, but they are going to feel guilt, rejection, punishment, and also liberation. And finally, we also have the element of performative interval, when Emmett and Lucian ultimately fail to perform a fixed identity, and this exposes their true nature. And just as a final conclusion, I'd like to say that Collins succeeds at exploring the traumatic impact of repression, the dominance and abuse, alongside the hopeful, transformative power of love and self-discovery. And the story really reinforces queer theory's critique of a fixed binary identity regarding gender and sexuality, and it portrays the queer existence and the otherization and queer individuals' traumatic experiences. And this also has to do with a narrative of self-censorship and discourse control, where the narrative and the act of storytelling itself becomes an act of liberation, but also oppression in the story. And this story invites for further a critical analysis from different perspectives, but particularly from the lenses of post-colonial studies or eco-criticism. Thank you very much for your attention.